Vicky, and I am the Research, Evaluation and Impact Officer of A Better Start Southend. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Lunchtime Learning webinar of Telling Stories About Impact. Okay, so what this webinar kind of aims to do is help you in telling stories about your impact and how to use evidence to show people that what the impact your work has had. So this includes kind of how to tailor your message to suit whichever audience you're aiming for. So what types of evidence can be used and in what ways, how to suit the story to the audience, and why it is important that evidence tells a story. So the first question we should kind of ask ourselves is why collect evidence of impact? And so what's the importance of that? So if you can demonstrate the impact you have, you'll be in a much stronger position to justify why people should use your service, fund your work, and listen to your insights. And for this, you need evidence of impact. So the first point that we'd like to make is about your evidence being robust and repeatable. So when we're referring to things being robust, we're kind of saying, is what you've got reliable? And if it's repeatable, can other people pick up your evidence and kind of replicate what you've done? And this is really important in quite a few studies that you might want to undertake. But the point of it is kind of making sure that you have like a blueprint or like an instruction manual. So it's really simple for other people to follow. In addition to that, it also helps with decision making. So this isn't just about making larger decisions kind of within big organisations that we like to think of, so like central and local government, but it also helps other parties kind of make decisions about your project or your programme. And that's things for if you're looking to obtain extra funding. A really important point here is, can your evidence be memorable? Can people remember kind of important factors within your evidence of impact? And what we kind of look for is for things to stand out so they can walk away from however you've produced your evidence and remember very key things and key messages. The other part of this is that it can direct what to work on next. So, for example, if you've got kind of evidence that's come out of a particular project or program, that might steer you in a different direction as to what you'd kind of set out right at the beginning. And it kind of can lead on to other projects being built. Does your evidence stand up to scrutiny? So basically, can people find flaws within your evidence of impact? And is it really tight and again, robust? Can your evidence of impact give a sense of scale of impact? So kind of what's the scale of the impact of your evidence? So does it kind of make an impact just within your organisation? Does it make an impact on a local context or a national context? And you may find that some of your evidence should be hard to dispute or ignore. So you might find some really interesting points that actually, when you put this forward to fundraising, you need to make them stand out so that other people can't ignore what's been said. So when to be wary? So how can you tell if your evidence is good? And these are some really key questions that we kind of encourage to ask yourself once you've collated your evidence. So is it reputable? So has it come from a reliable source? We've kind of all heard of the time old phrase of, did you get something from Wikipedia? And in that sense, the data that you might get from there is not very reliable. So how can you ensure that it's reliable? Do the claims that you're making make sense? Or are they kind of conflicted? So are they logical and follow a structure? Are there other explanations that haven't been explored? So in this sense, we might kind of get tunnel visioned about a particular piece of evidence, which tends to lead to us kind of ignoring the rest of the evidence that we've collected. And actually, when we take a step back and look at all of it together, it might be that this is telling a completely different story. My favourite one here is, have your responses been cherry-picked? And the reason for that is because what we tend to do, especially within research and collating evidence, is we only want to demonstrate the good parts of what our project has shown. But actually, we need to remember that all data is evidence, regardless if it tells a good story or something that could have been worked upon. Is the sample size big enough to really say something with confidence? So a prime example of this, and we use this a lot in our office, is the old L'Oreal adverts, where they say, yes, 90% of people, said that they absolutely loved the product, but actually there was only 10 people that were interviewed. So there's only 9 people that liked it. So how can we be confident that an entire population is really going to enjoy the product? Within this, you need to make sure that your sample size kind of represents a bigger collection of people, a bigger group of people. Off the back of that, it's super important to check the base numbers on percentages. So again, it's another thing that we hear a lot. So 75% of people really enjoyed a certain part of your project, but actually we only interviewed 4 people, so 3 out of 4. So we can't really put that in a report and say that this reflects the entire project when there was only 4 people included. Is the data complete? So did you manage to carry everything out that you had anticipated at the start? And are survey or interview questions balanced? Do they lead people, or are possible answers missing? So that's things like asking participants, what did you find beneficial, or how beneficial was the service? But actually we're assuming that they did find it beneficial, and they kind of feel pressured to answer that question when actually they might have a completely different opinion. So supporting your data. So context is everything. So like we said at the beginning, we've had some technical issues, so I'm going to see how this goes. But we've kind of put here 4 key places that you can kind of go to look for supporting your data. And these are really important factors when you're thinking about writing a report, because it shows the larger context of why what you're doing matters, and kind of other places that have undertaken similar things. So I'm going to try and click on the Google Scholar. I'll see if it clicks on it. I'm hoping people can see Google Scholar.
Yep, it's opened up the Google Scholar search page.
Hooray. Okay, so Google Scholar is really great for looking for a number of things, but specifically in this context, we try to look for white papers. So white papers are documents that have kind of been central to making decisions through government, and they're kind of like the starting step of that. So, for example, I don't know if someone wants to unmute and say kind of what their charity is or what they might be doing, and we can try and tailor it to that. So if anyone's working in education, maybe, or
Creative industries.
creative industries.
That's what I said, but I think I overlap with someone else.
That's what we could go creative.
Hi, Elizabeth.
So let's go for creative industries. So for example, we might want to look at white papers that relate to media. Okay, so within this, we can see a number of white papers have been brought up. So for example, media and literacy and the links between that. Now, a really key thing here is you can toggle your results. So if we see that there's quite a few results that have come up, on the left-hand side, we can do a time range. So it may be relevant that you find a time range that's suitable for you. So we might not want a white paper that's from 2000. We've had a lot of changes since 2000. So we might want to toggle it since 2021. And further down, we can kind of show by relevance and date, but also we can type in simple things such as UK, which will then refer it just to white papers within the UK. So Google Scholar is really easy to navigate in terms of that, but it's kind of advised to have a play around a bit and see what comes up. The next one that I wanted to present to you is kind of Tailor and Francis. So this is an online journal platform that you can look for. And what we tend to look for here is kind of more theoretical basis. So just to pre-warn you that some things on Tailor and Francis are free, others you do have to have a subscription. So you do have other journal platforms such as Sage, but Tailor and Francis is quite easy to navigate. So again, if we take creativity, so we might want to look at creativity in early years, for example. And we can see here that there's quite a few articles that have come up. So supporting creativity and imagination in early years. Again, it works in the same context that you can kind of change your subject. So if it's relevant to education or social sciences, the publication date. So I personally do tend to stick to Taylor and Francis, and because it's easier to navigate than say Sage. And they'll also come up as an option as to whether you are able to look at that. So if you don't have a subscription, it will say kind of here that there's a full text available. So you don't need to sign up to that, but some you might have to have a paid a paid prescription for. Another one that we might want to look at is Smart Southend. So for you, for those of you that are in Southend, obviously if you're in the wider county of Essex, there are similar ones that you can find on the Essex Gov website. But Smart Southend is really easy to navigate again, and this kind of just gives local statistics. So you can type things in on the search bar, and equally, if you go down, there's some really nice interactive tools. And things like this will show kind of like levels of deprivation and how that might link to your study. But equally, we can also type in things like SEND, so special educational needs and disabilities. And that will come up with a number of sources that you can use. So here there is only 4, and these are to do with children's education, making your mark. And then on the left, you can use different types of applications. So you won't get as many results as you will in kind of journal articles and Google Scholar, but these are more relative to what's happening in your local area. And then the final one that we'd like to kind of show you is the Office for National Statistics. So this is a much broader website, and you'll be surprised on what they pair up with kind of different subjects. But here you can find like national statistics. So for example, if you wanted to find levels of deprivation comparing here to a different area in the country, you can just type that in on the search bar and it will come up. The only thing with the Office for National Statistics is some of the data can be a little bit confusing if you're not used to looking at it. So it will come up with lots of things, and it's really just taking the time to understand what that data means, and kind of sifting through to see what's relevant to you. And then we've got, so outputs, oh, sorry, it's me. Happy clicking. Outputs versus outcomes. So it's very easy to mix these up, but we have to remember these are very different things. So we're going to go into further detail in a couple of slides. But the main message to get across here is the difference between output and outcomes. So output relates to the amount you did. So we'll take everyone's favourite subject, maths, clearly, and we'll use that as the topic. So for example, the amount of students that attended a maths test is the output. So how many students turned up? And then within outcome, you have things that are called hard outcomes and soft outcomes. And these relate to the impact that you've had, or perhaps that maths test has had. So a hard outcome here will be trying to understand how many students achieved well in their test. So what are the levels, the difference between, say, last year and this year? But a soft outcome will look at things that aren't necessarily measurable. So these are things like confidence. And whilst you can put steps in place to measure students' levels of confidence, it's not something that's easily measurable. So for a soft outcome, we would kind of ask students how confident they felt undertaking this test. In the grand scheme of things, you have to ask yourself whether the activities you did make a difference, and how you can demonstrate that they made a difference too. Now we move on to data, narrative, and visuals. So you've done all the hard work, you've gathered all your evidence, but we need to remember that data on its own can be hard to engage with. So here you need to ask yourself how you can grab people's attention and help them to understand what your evidence shows. Data is only one of 3 elements, and the other 2 can help you connect with your audience. So if we look at the infographic on the right, we can see here that whilst we've got data and then we've got the story and we've got visuals, actually they all need to work together in order to engage the audience and kind of stand for change. Within this, we can then turn complex data findings. So for example, if we've got lots of statistics and lots of stories going on at the same time, into one digestible narrative, which can then easily be conveyed to your audience. So data storytelling basically means that numbers alone rarely tell the whole story, and the context matters. So it's all very well saying that, 10,000 people attended a service, but actually it doesn't really tell us how effective that service was. It just tells us that a lot of people turned up. Complex or detailed information can be hard to make sense of. So if your story is quite complicated, it's not something that people can easily look at and understand what the message is behind that. Another part to that is human brains are built to respond emotionally to stories by humanizing data, and stories can make your evidence easier to understand and remember. So even if you think back to, I don't know, your favorite literature or your favorite film, we kind of always associate ourselves with the emotion that's behind that. And that then leads us to understanding what the story was. And it kind of works the same in research. So if there's no emotion behind it, it kind of just feels a bit flat. Within that, data visualization is really key. And a good thing to remember here is that our brains understand visual cues more quickly than numbers and text. And we are more likely to connect with something that's visual. So, for example, when we think back to famous adverts, I don't know, such as Nike, we understand what the symbol is, but actually within that, it states what year it was established. But I guarantee no one can remember the year that it was established. We just remember the logo. So combining pictures and simple numbers is more memorable than just text. So quite regularly we'll have data that combines base numbers or simple numbers that we can easily take away from. So the infographic down the bottom with the people shows us lower, the life expectancy is 9 and 10 years in lower areas of higher deprivation. The map on the left-hand side is just a quick visual representation of the deprivation index in 2019. And the reason we've put this on here is because it tells a story a lot quicker than having all of that written in a report. So we could estimate that it will take a number of words to write this out effectively. But actually, if someone needs to find information quickly, they can take one look at the map and say, yes, we've got our data. So knowing your audience is also really key. So questions that you might want to ask yourself is predominantly, why might they be interested? Are they looking for quick access to specific information? Detailed analysis and recommendations? A general overview of your activities, so kind of what's been going on in the project? To hear about participants' experiences, so are they looking for particular quotes that people think of the service? Or are they looking to get ideas for their own actions? Additionally, what format suits them best? So here, if you wanted to write a written report, how detailed does that need to be? And a key factor to remember with this is that the longer the report, you need to question yourself whether your audience is still going to be engaged by the end of it. How does that tell a story, and what's the purpose for it being quite long? An online article or social media post. So these can be really effective, specifically with the social media post. And this is kind of to target your audience from further afield. So, for example, if you're using things like Instagram or LinkedIn, you can easily utilize the hashtag and it will come up with a number of other things that are associated with that. So people from even across the world can click on that hashtag and see similar projects and similar concepts. A video or podcast can be really great if you know that you've got an audience that's super busy. So by producing a video or a podcast, you might be targeting people that only have time to look at stuff when they're on the commute back home from work, or if they're going to the gym or doing the washing up. These can be really quick and snappy ways to keep your audience engaged at a more convenient time for them. A presentation or webinar, we tend to say, is slightly more formal, but sometimes this is what is required. So, for example, like today, or it can be if you need to attend certain board meetings, and this may be more appropriate. Posters or artwork work really well when we're trying to target members of the community. So leaving them in spaces where there's a higher footfall can be really effective, and equally anybody can look at it. Or does it only require a meeting or conversation? So not all evidence and impact needs to be a really complex task, you may find a small piece of evidence that actually having a conversation with 2 or 3 key people may assist in shaping your service. Other considerations that you need to be mindful of is the knowledge level. So when you're thinking about your target audience, are you trying to apply to everybody? Are you only trying to apply to a certain demographic? Myself, I'm from the kind of background where I feel like evidence and research is for everybody, but this can also be tailored in a different approach if I'm attending a specific meeting with fellow researchers. The complexity of language is really key, because what we don't want to do is kind of push certain audiences away. So again, if you're attending a specific meeting, it might be okay to use jargon that's specific to your project or your area of work, but actually, does that need to be used consistently? Does that need to be used in a video or a podcast where you might disengage audiences from the get-go? The take-home messages are also really key. So if you've got your evidence of impact, if those take-home messages aren't clear, then people leave feeling a little bit confused, and it kind of relates to that point where things aren't as memorable as they could have been. And finally, one size does not fit all. So sometimes it's advisable to utilize more than one format. So, for example, maybe combining a written report that applies to certain members of your company, along with a poster or a video where that can be shared within the community. And I'll pass you over to my colleague, Nathaniel Owen.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm Nathaniel Owen. I'm the Research Evaluation and Impact Assistant at A Better Start Southend. And I'm going to be primarily touching on aims, how we can strengthen our work through collating evidence, and the key ways in which we can communicate messages, findings in different and illustrative ways, considering how the audience for your presentation will change the methods you employ and the importance of humanising your data, which Mickey has already touched upon. So for those of you who are unaware, A Better Start Southend was a 10-year test and learn programme funded by the National Lottery Community Fund, launched in 2015. So Southend was one of 5 A Better Start sites, along with Blackpool, Bradford, Lambeth, Nottingham. And within the Southend context, we worked in 6 wards, which are amongst the most deprived in Southend and nationally too. So these wards were Kersal, Milton, Shoeburyness, Victoria, Westborough and West Shoebury. Our key areas of focus were communication and language, diet and nutrition, and social and emotional development. And our aim was to make Southend-on-Sea the best place in the country to bring up a child and be a parent. And I just wanted to touch upon this quickly, that A Better Start Southend was a massive programme, but as you can see here, our aim was a single sentence. We wanted to make Southend the best place in the country to bring up a child and be a parent. Though there are lots of sub-aims or objectives related to communication, language, diet and nutrition, they're all captured in that one aim of making Southend-on-Sea the best place. So within A Better Start Southend, we have this mosaic of evidence. So we have in-house evaluation, which is what our team does. We analyze our own data and write reports, but we also have process evaluation, and this is more of the outputs and the outcomes. It's database data plus info from questionnaires, service information, and some of those outputs could be the number of sessions a certain project had and the number of people who attended those projects. Related to this, we have the individual project data from the University of Essex. This is data collected from each of the different projects, usually collated into reports for each of them, and it combines those outputs, hard outcomes, with soft outcomes. We also have the ABS national data, so we collaborate with each of the ABS sites to contribute to the national evaluation on the impact of the programme as a whole nationally. There is also a national dashboard where you can see all of the data related to each of the sites. And we have the ABSS programme data. So RSM have conducted independent analysis in 2022, 23, and 24, which looks at ABSS as a whole. And I just wanted to touch upon the fact that having external research partners is very useful because it allows us to gain that outside perspective, and it strengthens and adds robustness to our work, and it also helps to keep us grounded. And together, as you can see, this sort of forms our golden star of evidence. So all of this combined with our original research and analysis and our contextual research is what we've used for our stories of impact. So as Mickey has mentioned, numbers don't tell the whole story. We have this mosaic of evidence from different sources, but we need to be multifaceted in our reporting to tell complex stories. So one of the key messages that we want to get across is that the value that's added is more than the sum of the parts because they're able to work together. As you can see from the infographic on the right, we have connected communities, network services, resilient parents, and resilient families. And these different concentric circles connected show that we are bringing together these groups to enact change. And the quote in, or not the quote, the message at the bottom is finding different ways to communicate that message. And the rest of my section will be on the best ways to communicate such a message. So one of the ways in which we've done this is one of our colleagues created a service map of ABSS. So I think this really exemplifies the message that it's greater than the sum of the parts, because ABSS has had all of these connections or nodes to different organizations like the NHS, SAVS, City Family, or different provisions like breastfeeding or SEND. But through these connections, we're also providing paths that people can travel throughout this ecosystem of ABSS. It isn't just the services we fund that make a difference, it's creating pathways and communities that make ABSS greater than the sum of its parts. Now onto some of our data. So this is from our stories of impact work. As you can see, it's very visual. It's got lots of different colors, but all we have here is essentially outputs, and outputs without hard outcomes or soft outcomes, they don't actually tell us the story of the impact that A Better Start Southend has had, as your outputs and outcomes need to work in conjunction with one another. But this is good in terms of tailoring to audience, which I'm also going to broach as well, because it's immediately appealing. If someone saw this, they'd want to look and see what it is that we're doing. And it's good to create that visual stimuli. But what we want to do is we want to add depth to this and begin to add elements that can tell that story. So as you can see here, this slide shows lots of information around the benefits of infant breastfeeding, but you need to edit this information for the story you want to tell. So Mickey mentioned with the maths test example about outputs and outcomes. So our hard outputs here were the number of people who receive support through one-to-one breastfeeding. And this leads to hard outcomes, which would be the sustainment of breastfeeding at 6 to 8 weeks. And the hard outcomes and the outputs, these can enable or sustain the soft outcomes, which is the 65% of people reported feeling confident about breastfeeding. But you can also see that we've got quotes here, and this is the really important element of humanizing your data. So what these quotes do is they add another layer to the presentation. We're combining the data-driven aspect with the graphs and the outputs with the human element. Data is very useful, and obviously we're all data geeks, so we love that. But showing lived experience is vital because it helps us to connect more with the data presented. You can also, when we're speaking about tailoring, you can think about this in terms of the audience too. So if your audience is more professional, so we do a lot of work with the council. If it's more professional, you'd want more of the hard data and the hard outcomes. But as the stories of impact also has a community element to it, we want that social element too. We want the human element because people connect more to stories, as Mickey mentioned. And this is just another illustration of that. So we have outputs, outcomes, but we also have quotes. So this is on child development and school readiness. So the session educates you on how to play with your child and how language develops in children. And it helps you as a parent to rethink how you approach speaking with your child and what could work better. And that really simplifies the whole of this theme of child development into one concise quote that's spoken by someone who's actually accessed the service. But sometimes you can go a step further, and we might want to simplify this even further. So here is an infographic we created, and this tells you a lot. So it's about confidence before and after ABSS, related to reading with children, looking after your own mental health and well-being, and confidence in breastfeeding. But this simple infographic, it's simplifying or condensing information that would take around 1,000 words if you actually wrote it in a traditional report. One of the other ways in which you can tell these stories, and also an element of humanizing the data, is you can create these visual elements. So we created videos and vlogs. So here we have a video showing the impact families growing together at TrustLinks had on those who accessed it.
My name's Abby Rex. I'm the Children, Youth and Families Manager at TrustLinks. TrustLinks is a local independent mental health charity, so we support families and adults across Mid and South Essex.
Got moved here just over 3 years ago, so I didn't know anyone in the area. So I've come here, I've built up that group of mum friends, and yeah, just a great support network. I think being outside in nature is so important for young children. I think it's good for them to get their hands dirty, it's good for them to get stung by stinging nettles and smell the different kinds of herbs, and really good for their development.
From families growing together, I think parents get the support from one another. I think that is kind of a really huge part of what it does. It is a family. People who would never have come across one another in their day-to-day life have the opportunity to come in and explore and gain advice from one another and understand that actually parenthood can be really tricky and they're not the only ones going through it.
I live in a flat, have no balcony, so this is just perfect for my kids. I come here to relax. I know that it's a safe space for my children to run around. I know they're not going to escape. I can chill out, talk to other mums, and I've just got nothing but good stuff to say about this place.
It's good for a dad, there's no judgment. So when you come, everyone's exactly the same with you, whether you're a mum or a dad. You feel as if you can relax a bit as well. As soon as you get in, the staff know you a cup of tea, yeah, no worries, and get your tea and biscuits and kind of have that kind of chance to chat with other adults. I'd say it's been great for us, kind of, because the family's growing together. Our family has grown together with the people here.
It is fantastic. I love this place. I can't express how good it is. I can't, no words. Just.
Hi everyone, I'm Beth Buzzer. I'm the Research Evaluation Impact Lead at Better Start, and I'm just going to be finishing off today's presentation. So you've heard from my colleagues that we've got great evidence, we've got great data, and we've done some great storytelling. And the final piece of the puzzle is to make sure that we make some really great conclusions. Now, part of this is understanding your successes and the things that have worked. But as Mickey mentioned, you need to make sure you're not cherry picking, and you need to acknowledge things that haven't necessarily gone according to plan and you might necessarily say are a failure. And I'd like to draw your attention now to a drug that we've probably all heard of called Viagra, which was initially designed as a heart treatment drug, and it had unexpected consequences. And obviously now it's become a multi-million-pound selling treatment, and that wasn't necessarily what it was designed for in the first place. So we need to acknowledge that where we have something which we might consider to be a failure, it's actually a point for learning, and we can take that forward to make even greater successes for the future. Thinking specifically about the successes of ABSS, the first one we've got on there is we've improved the outcomes for children. And this is really important because it goes back to our aims about making Southend the best place for a child, and we've managed to achieve this aim. This has been through improving the knowledge, skills and confidence of parents. This is one of the softer outcomes we've been talking about. We've given better access to support for Southend's families and fostered greater interaction between services, which means there's been faster and greater impact for families. We've been able to share learning and improve relationships, which has given new opportunities for peer-to-peer support. And we've also seen the value of co-production and really ingraining the role of families and parents in developing the services. And this is something we're seeing now go out into the organisations we've been working with, and them now using co-production. Thinking about the takeaway messages, so the learning we've had from ABSS, and this falls into 4 broad categories within programme delivery, parental resilience, partnership working, and organisation factors. So first of all, programme delivery, we found that by supporting soft outcomes has enabled hard outcomes. So for example, by improving parent and child confidence has enabled things such as child development to come through. We've seen the importance of test and learn. This has been really important for ABSS to give a safe space for flexible learning. We've also seen that evidence and impact are essential in order to drive change. Thinking about parental resilience, we found that non-judgmental staff build confidence with parents. They're more willing to open up to staff, and then in turn they're supported better by the services. We've seen the importance of peer-to-peer support and community sharing knowledge. By really fostering this community resilience and sharing of knowledge helps to support parents. Thinking about partnership working, we've seen that ABSS works as an ecosystem through that lovely map we saw earlier. We found that building relationships and trust takes time though, but by having common goals between different organisations, you can really drive success. In terms of organisation, we found that programme management is complex, and difficult external periods, such as we saw during COVID and the subsequent cost of living crisis, has created challenges. We also found that different leaders will shape the organisation's culture. I just wanted to finish up by talking a bit more about our Stories of Impact, which is our vehicle for disseminating the data. So we produced an exhibition of all of our data with some of the banners of the work that you saw earlier at a launch event we had at the very beginning of December, where we invited along professionals, practitioners, councillors, members of parliament, policymakers. We were able to show all of the evidence that we've analysed so far. And following that, we've been running a roadshow in the community since January, where we've gone to various venues to show this data to members of the public. And we're finishing off the celebration of our data at City Day on the 1st of March, where we're going to be joining day-long community celebration of Southend City. And we're taking over a retail unit in the Royals Shopping Centre. We'll be showing off some of our posters, banners, and some of these interactive displays you can see on the right here. So if you're free, please come along and see us. So finally, in summary, what have we learnt today about telling stories about impact? Firstly, good quality evidence increases your impact. This is really important to show a good quality story. We described the difference between your outputs, hard outcomes and soft outcomes and how these relate to each other. We've also talked about the importance of data storytelling, showing that by humanising data, stories can make your evidence easier to understand and remember. It's important to know your audience and tailor your presentation. And there are lots of different ways you can share your data. Be creative and you can increase your impact. Finally, it's really important to celebrate your successes, but always remember your points for learning. Thank you. That's the end of the presentation. I'm happy to have any questions.
Thank you for that, Beth, and thanks to your colleagues as well for kind of walking us through that presentation and highlighting how people can utilize impact to tell their own stories. We did have a couple of questions in the chat to start with, if that's okay. So Andrea actually asked a question about who the filmmaker was of the video that was shown.
So Danny did that in-house, and she's working with, I don't know what organisation Rob's from. We work with an external videographer, but she edits and creates these with him.
Okay, perfect. So maybe we can get that organisation afterwards, maybe.
Yeah.
Lizzie asked, where has the roadshow taken place?
So far we had the launch at the Park Inn, which is the hotel at the end of Southend opposite Adventure Island. We've been to 3 food banks so far. We've got a couple of community centres on the agenda. We're going to Shoebury, and we're going to Salvation Army in Southend. And we're also going to be at the Civic Centre for a number of days as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, so in the library, yes, I forgot about that. The forum, we're at the forum as well.
I can see Joe and her colleague nodding, so there you go. I got another question from Andrea asking, have you considered working with artists for data visualization?
Yes, we did actually work very closely with a fantastic lady called Tori Woolley. She's done a few events with us. We ran a workshop, gosh, it must be about a year ago now, with our parent champions, and we created a really nice piece of artwork which is currently on display at the Royal Shopping Centre. It's in the windows right at the front. You can go and have a look at it. And it shows a representation of how they found their journeys being a parent champion. It's a really beautiful piece of work, so I'd recommend having a look.
Amazing, thank you. That seems to be the end of the questions in the chat. If anyone's got a question from the room, please feel free to kind of jump in or maybe raise your hand. Well, it looks like a clean sweep for you all. Doesn't look like there's any questions. So clearly you've done a fantastic job of highlighting to people how to demonstrate impact. So thank you again to A Better Start Southend for coming along to kind of present this to us and highlight to us how we can support our messaging and get the word out about all of the great stuff that we do. Is there any closing comments that you'd like to make at all, Beth?
No, I don't think so, other than to please come along if you can to City Day. We're going to be there the whole day on the 1st of March. It's going to be a really nice event. There's going to be entertainment for children there as well. So the opportunities to come and talk to us while children play. So yeah, please come along.
Fantastic. We'll make sure that's included in the summary at the end of the meeting as well. Lots of comments are coming in, thanking you for the session. So clearly many people thought it was useful. And we'll make sure to send the slides to everyone here afterwards, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. And I'm sure we'll see each other again soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.